G'day guys. I got asked a question the other day and I thought that I would answer it with a video. The question, somewhat rephrased, is do I need to know Vim to be a software engineer? And I'm going to answer this question with, you could say, three parts. We're going to start with the definition of Vim, just in case you've never heard of Vim or aren't quite sure what it is. I'm going to give you a very short demo, just showing you an example of what it is and what it can do. And I'll give you my side of the debate as well as to why I think it can be useful and why I think it sometimes pays off to know it. So I want to preface this by saying that I'm by no means a Vim enthusiast or Vim power user. If you found one of those guys, I'm sure they'd be able to give you a ton of other reasons to use Vim. Other than what I'm going to talk about today. But the opinion that I'm going to give you today is the opinion of someone who's, as said, not a Vim enthusiast, not a Vim power user, just somebody that does find some situations where I think it pays to know it. So that's the perspective that I'm going to share. So let's start off with a definition. What is it? Vim is a command line text editor. So it's an editor that you can invoke from a terminal over the command line. That's in contrast to something like Notepad or TextEdit, where when you open them up, they appear in their own window. They have buttons and menus and other graphical user interface elements. With Vim, it's something that you use purely on the command line through a terminal like what I've got open at the moment. So I think now is probably a good time to give you a little demo just in case you've never seen it before or maybe have forgotten what you can do with it and how it works. So to start off with, I'm in a directory called v_demo and it's an empty directory, there's nothing in it. So I want to use Vim to create a new file. Let's call it, say, sample.txt. So I'm going to use the v program name, and I'm going to specify an argument which is going to be the name of the file that I want to edit. So if the file doesn't exist, it will be created. If the file does exist, it will edit the existing file. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and let's maybe go over one feature of Vim. Some people may call it a feature, others may call it a source of confusion, but Vim has different modes. And I'm pressing the L key and the K key and the J key right now, and nothing's really happening. And that's because we're basically in a view mode. So a view mode does not really let you edit the document. Now there are certain hotkeys that might make changes to the document, but most of the keys that you hit in view mode won't change anything. To actually make a change, you want to enter insert mode. So I'm going to press the I key, and you notice we've got this insert label down the bottom left-hand corner, and I'm just going to type some text, like this is some text, and that's great. Let's say this is the only change that I want to make to the file, or this is the only text that I want to add to the file, and I want to go back to my terminal. This is where I think a lot of people get confused when they're using Vim, because we need to basically go back firstly to that view mode and then go back to the terminal. So to go back to the view mode, we're going to press escape, and to go back to the terminal, we want to use a command inside Vim. So when you're inside Vim and you're inside this view mode, where you're able to navigate the document but not really make changes to it, you can press the colon, and notice we've got this interesting thing going on down here in the bottom left hand corner, and I want to write the file to disk and then close it. So I'm going to press colon WQ and hit enter, and that's going to write the file to disk and then quit out of Vim. And you can see we're back to our terminal now, and if I list the contents of the directory, we've got sample.txt. So if I do the same thing again, we can see that we've got some text in here. I can navigate through it, but I'm in view mode only. If I want to make a change to it, same thing. Press the I key to enter insert mode, and this is some text. Now, if I wanted to get out of Vim without saving changes, I can do the same thing, but don't specify the W, so don't do a write. Now Vim is telling me, hey, if you quit, um, there's not going to be any change since the last time that you wrote. Are you sure you want to do this? Or at least that's how I, again, as a non-Vim enthusiast, interpret this. So I'm just going to follow their suggestion and put an exclamation mark at the end of that. And now we come back. So that's basically how Vim works. As you could see, it's slightly quirky in the sense that you've got these different view modes. You need to remember certain keys do different things, like when you're in view mode, press I to go into insert mode. When you're in insert mode, press escape to go back to the view mode. To actually exit Vim, you need to remember the :Q or $WQ. And how to exit Vim, if you haven't heard of it, is kind of a running joke among the community, just because it is so, you could say, unintuitive. If you don't know about it, it's very hard to just stumble across it. You need to, Google that and remember it. So there is definitely some quirky stuff about Vim, and yeah, I can certainly see why some people may advocate against it because of that quirkiness. But let's move on to step 3 or part 3 of my answer, which is the debate. Why I think even despite its quirkiness, I think that there are some situations where it pays to know Vim, even if, like myself, you don't consider yourself a Vim enthusiast in particular. There are still some situations where it pays to know it. And there are 2 that come to mind. Firstly, if you're ever trying to resolve a merge conflict or modify a commit message or something like that over the command line, by default, Git, at least on all of the systems that I've used it on, is configured to use Vim as the default editor. Now you can change that, you can override that, and that may not even be the case on your system. But whenever I've used it, Vim has been the default editor for editing over the command line. So unless you are bothered to change that setting, override that setting, it pays to know Vim. Just so that if you are in a situation where you need to, for example, resolve a merge conflict over the command line, you don't have to abort, update the setting, and then try it again. You can at least make progress and get the task done, even if you are later going to change that setting. The other, perhaps even more common situation that I find it useful to know Vim in is if you're ever SSHing onto a remote server and you need to modify some file on the server. Now, in today's world with DevOps and containers and things like that, the frequency in which you need to do this may not be too common. But if you ever are in that situation where you need to SSH onto a server and modify some file, you are of course limited to using the command line. So there are probably going to be some alternatives to editing files on the command line. There probably is going to be something like Nano that you can use instead of Vim, but Vim is usually a pretty safe bet. Chances are Vim is going to be on the system, and it's going to be one of the tools that you can use to interact with files. So I'm not sure, how frequently things like Nano or the other command line text editors are present on systems, but whenever I've had to SSH into something, Vim is always a safe bet that it's going to be available. So that's another situation where if you don't know Vim and you don't know of any alternative to Vim that you can kind of rely on to be available to you, you might be in a bit of trouble if you need to edit something on a server of SSH using a command line. So those are kind of the 2 situations that I find come up every now and then where I think it pays to know Vim. You don't need to be an expert at it, but at least be able to open a file, edit a file, move between view and insert modes, save your changes, and get back to your terminal. If you know how to do that, I think that's probably enough Vim knowledge. But of course, feel free to learn more. But that's my take on it. That's when I think Vim is useful, and what I think you probably ought to know. Anyway, thanks very much for following along and watching, and I shall catch you later. Bye.